You know, the funny thing about me doing this podcast is I have enlisted pretty much all of my friends to come on just about every episode. And this week is no different. I'm bringing on one of my friends from college, Tori. Tori, how are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling better after getting settled, ready to go. I'm excited to talk to you. Thanks for having
We,
me on.
yeah, we did just feng shui, whatever that word is, your entire apartment to get this to look good. You're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Definitely not a podcaster. I can't admit this is my first time. Had to make sure the vibe was right, the aesthetic.
It is. We are learning again. I am enlisting all my friends because the whole purpose of this podcast is to share stories of everyday people, and this is one of them that is inspiring and also difficult in a lot of ways. So I have brought Tori on to share her story. She was again one of my friends from college, but as she kind of went into adulthood, Tori got diagnosed with cancer. So, Tori, I'm going to let you take this away and kind of share your cancer story, and then we'll kind of get into more other things.
Yeah, that sounds great. No, like first of all, it's really humbling to be here and I'm honored to be asked. I have kind of always thought that my journey was just a little under the radar, which is how I liked it. I want to just, get through it, power on, move on to the next thing. It was really kind of in a transition period for me too. So I was diagnosed when I was 25. Goodness, now you're gonna test me on the stats here. And I took a couple extra laps in college, we'll just say that. So I was still kind of in that phase and moving into finding a career. And at that point, like had planned on doing, like education, other things that had to be rerouted because, cancer obviously takes a toll on your body physically. And of course, it's a bit time consuming. It's almost like its own job itself. But no, I was diagnosed with non Hodgkin's lymphoma, and yeah, it was a wild ride. It was um, really shocking at that time. I was still living in Manhattan, and looking back now, you can kind of like you start to see, more like symptoms, and you're like, okay, was that part of this, And I do think I was sick for a few months before actually like, getting the diagnosis. Lymphoma is a blood cancer, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't know a ton about like honestly the health facts about everything. So it's really more of like a lifestyle journey for me and how it changed me in that aspect. But yeah, I mean that's kind of where it started. And I don't know, does that get us off
Yeah,
on the right foot?
no, it totally does. And I know this is weird, right? Like you're like, oh
Yeah.
gosh, I have to like look back on this. And looking back on a part that was really hard for you in your life and something that you never saw coming. So how did you find out that this happened? Like what were the signs that led you to be like, okay, I think I need to go see a doctor? What happened?
Yeah. So at that point, like I said, I was going to school for education and I had taken on a full-time role. And I just recognized, I was diagnosed in June. And that whole entire semester, I was exhausted. And I'm normally a really upbeat person. And to be fair, at that time too, I was managing two jobs. I was working at a bar. I was working at Tanner's in Manhattan, and I was closing that down, and that's like really late nights, and then getting up to go to a school, which is early mornings. And I just felt myself just like dragging constantly, and looked at like things like my diet and drinking water, and of course like activity, and I could have done better in all those areas. So I think I kept telling myself, this is a me problem. It was in general, but I ended up, really getting sick in March, dealing with just like physical pain, not really being able to like heal fully. I had a pretty bad cough, which I chalked it up to having, I think at that point I was saying like strep throat or something like that. And my lymph nodes were just completely swollen. And at one point, my roommate and best friend like was asking me like, what is going on here? And that's just kind of what led to me realizing like, okay, I should probably go get this checked out. Not to mention, kind of the ball drop here. My biological mom died from so she died from non-Hodgkin's, and I actually had Hodgkin's. I think I misspoke earlier. But there is two different blood cancers. Again, I'm not the one to go on WebMD and figure out everything about my cancer. It really wasn't my style. I just did what the doctors told me. But my mom did pass from cancer in 1999. So same blood cancer, but kind of different styles. Non-Hodgkin's is a lot less curable even to date. Really, my cancer is one of the most curable cancers, and actually the age range that I got it is the most common. So it was just really interesting kind of to learn those things. And they also say it is more of an environmental disease versus, what you would like hereditary or genetic. But a lot of studies are now showing that it does have hereditary like tendencies. A lot of doctors believe it is just fully hereditary, and it runs on my side of the family. Unfortunately, my grandpa, biological grandpa, also was diagnosed while I was going through treatment with non-Hodgkin's, and it makes sense because they were farmers. So I think a lot of it stemmed from that. But long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, that's kind of how it all started and kind of where it came from, and having that family history is kind of also what tempted me to go see a doctor. Yeah.
So when you got the diagnosis and they're like, you have this, I'm going to go kind of two different things here, but because you did just talk about your mom and your grandpa, your biological mom and grandpa, I should say that because I also know your other family history. But what was going through your head? Were you like, oh my gosh, I know this happened with them? And then you found out about your grandpa. Like, what were those experiences like when you know it's part of your family? What was your like kind of first feelings as this started to happen?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint like exactly what I was feeling. It was, some time ago. And I think I have, unfortunately, and I will say, unfortunately, blocked a lot of that part of my life. And it wasn't just cancer. So a lot of that went with it. A lot of just outside of, cancer activities. But the initial feeling, I mean, it was fear for sure. And I I just remember the most fearful thing was not being able to like carry on life and like really start my life. At that point,
Yeah.
I really hadn't been in love. Um, and yeah.
And I don't want you to cry unless you feel
I'm
comfortable.
not
That's
trying
okay.
to. I honestly said I was going to be totally fine. So, um, yeah,
But
but
I also know that like this was such a incredibly difficult time in your life and emotions are normal for that and what you're experiencing even talking about it again like this is the reason I wanted to talk about this topic. Not because it's easy, not because, I want to put anybody through those emotions, but because it happens so often. Everybody knows somebody that has been diagnosed or died from cancer, and it's horrible. If there's one enemy, I think we all have, it's cancer. So you showing those emotions is very real and very normal and very genuine. So please know that I have also personally cried on this podcast many a times. So you're clear. But
uh,
that also just shows how raw and how hard that was for you, especially at that age in your life.
yeah.
So going from finding out the diagnosis, how long were you going through cancer for and chemo and treatment and everything?
Well, so it's a little difficult. While my cancer is like extremely curable, I think in the 80% range. Um, there is that other percent where you can, relapse. And that did happen to me. And there was about a year lapse in there. Truth be told, I don't ever think I was fully in remission. A lot of my family and my doctors, kind of feel the same way. It was a very, very minimal spot in my chest and what they call your thalamus. Um, and a lot of women like have it from just growing up and having like extra breast tissue. So it was this little piece that wasn't necessarily worth a full biopsy because the last time they would have to biopsy that area, you have to like deflate a lung, and it's just a lot more invasive. And so at that point, I mean, we had all decided that it wasn't worth it. If it grew in like certain amounts, we would address that then. So technically, I was like in remission for a year, but I was diagnosed in like 2019, and I was completely cancer free by February of 2022.
Okay.
So long duration there, but some off times for sure. But yeah, that's kind of what that looked like.
And everybody talks about going through chemo who have gone through it, and it's just this very emotionally and physically taxing part on your body. What was the chemo process like for you? Like, can you speak to some of that? Because I think first person experience is a lot different than me seeing it and talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Morgan, I feel like you were there through some of it. I mean, you always were checking in on me. So, and that, you know, that's what got me through everything is my friends. I mean, that support system was like no other. And I hope we get to get into that a little bit later because it seriously changed my life. Um, but as far as like the treatment goes, I was very, very lucky the first time around. I physically, I felt fine. I was still fairly active. Yeah, I would say like a couple days after like the infusion where you actually go to the doctor's office, you sit in that chair and you get those medications injected into you. A couple days after that, that's when it would set in about 24 to 48 hours. And I've always struggled with like acid reflux and sensitive stomach issues. So that's what I was most nervous about going into treatment, like how sick it would make me. But I really, really was physically lucky. I The worst part of that was losing my hair, and I know, yeah, that's really a part you know about, but that, and I feel so silly when I get so upset about that, but that still to this day is like just was the most frustrating thing. Like I just, it made my confidence go down, and looking back, it's so silly to like feel that way, but it's something that, it to me, I always grew up with it being kind of one of my best features, something that was like complimented. And like I said, I hadn't been in love at that point. So I was just like, oh my God, it was like the end of the world. But overall, that was 6 months of treatment, starting in like July or August, I think, after I'd found out in June of 2019. So I finished up that winter, and it was right before COVID. So that was like its own transition in itself, being immunocompromised, as you can imagine. So my parent, and I had moved back with my parents when I found out, when I was diagnosed in Manhattan, living in Manhattan still. But my having my dad been through this, KU was like kind of the best place to go. So it was time to pick up my bags, move home, and just take my time to get healthy. And then, like I said, it was about a year until we did another biopsy of that chest piece finally, and started that treatment. And that was a whole different situation. I ended up undergoing a stem cell transplant,
Wow.
otherwise known as like a bone marrow transplant. So I did an autologous, which was my own cells. So it's not like I was, donated cells or anything like that. But I mean, that is an amazing gesture if you have the opportunity to do it. I mean, it can really, really help. It gave my mom several more years. So it's still just the whole process is really, really, really interesting to learn about. But that was tough. It was a really intense chemo, 7 days straight. Um, Hours at a time. And that was the most physically sick I felt. In After a stem cell transplant, you're basically down to zero. I'm blanking on the word, but like all of your levels, like your potassium, all these things, like it's basically at zero. So you have to self isolate for 90 days. You do have a caretaker. So I was at home. My mom was really helping me take care. At that point, I moved in and even was sharing a bathroom with my sister, and we weren't able to do that during this time. So she had to go use a different restroom just because of how important it is to like not get sick and get those germs. If you do get a fever over like 101 degrees, you're admitted to the hospital. So that happened to me twice. And during that COVID year was very, very lonesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the most physically ill I felt. Just a lot on my body. Went weeks without eating. Was the smallest I ever have been. Um, yeah, it was tough, but that's so I got a little bit of both worlds, if you will.
Yeah, you got a lot of different variations of that. And I remember seeing you after you had gone in this isolation period or talking to, I can't remember which one it was, because again, it was COVID times and that feels like a black hole in itself. But
Exactly.
I do remember really specifically talking to you after this. You're like, I'm so happy that this is over. You were like, I can't imagine having gone through one of the hardest things that you had just gone through, and then you had to be isolated on top of it. Now, I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you had your mom to be this person and caregiver for you in that situation. And I imagine that that was probably so helpful to have such a close piece of your life that was the one that you could at least interact with. That time period, like for both of you guys, what was that like in that isolation period? Like what were things that you were trying to do? What was happening in those 90 days?
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, anyone can relate, I think, when you're 25 years old and being told you have cancer and uprooting your life in Manhattan, working at a bar in a school and just doing my thing and immediately having to go back and like do this real adult like life shit, and sorry.
You can cuss, it's okay.
um
You deserve every cuss word that you would like to say, so just have at it.
yeah. Um, no, so it was tough at times. I was angry. I was in an angry spot. And I was there for after. I mean, it wasn't like, boom, I'm done with my 190 days, whatever, and all is well. While I physically felt pretty good, there was still a lot of physically taxing things. I mean, after you essentially like lay in a bed for 90 days. And I think it was more of like and people I can think really relate to it because of the COVID timing. We were all forced to kind of be close together. You probably fought, with the people that you're the closest with. And so it was tough on a relationship. It was also in a sense, like, I went through like some shame and embarrassment. I mean, when you're, that sick, like there's a lot of things you just can't control. Like I felt sick often and it gets uncomfortable, but she would have to help me basically like do my laundry. I could, really couldn't make it up and down the stairs without just like being like exhausted. And
Mm.
that just takes a toll on a relationship. But I couldn't have done it without her. I mean, she drove me to every doctor's appointment. I had to go daily during those times. And I really can't imagine it being anybody else next to me and helping me through that because she's just so caring and so nurturing. And yeah, if you've had the chance to meet her, like it's just the truth. So I'm very, very fortunate to have had that. But
Yeah, and you also had mentioned at one point you were talking about the support system that you had, not just with her, but also friends and family and people checking in on you. Like, I think people feel like maybe when they message people, especially as they're going through these things, you're like, oh, I feel really bad. I don't want to make them talk about it, or I don't want to reach out to them. I don't want to bother them, but I feel like from the other side, that's a very helpful thing to do. Am I wrong or right in that?
100% right. 100% right. I mean, it was truly like looking back, I mean, just being able to be that open with, and I consider myself like a really just friendly person. Like I have a really like large, close knit group of friends, and I never really felt, I don't know, out of place like going to them. I felt more comfortable going to my friends really honestly than my family at some points. And I think it's because I almost felt like a burden to my family, and that's not the vibe they were giving at all. But I don't even know how to put it into words. Like the support, I had barely started a job that, one of our best friends, Diane, had actually set me up with. And it was really something I was excited about because I had already gone through the cancer thing. I thought I was kind of done with it. And I start this job, and then 3 months into it, I find out I'm sick again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? And at this point, I'm like, I know I have to take 3 months off because I have to self isolate. And the support that I received, even from strangers, it was just life changing. Like I said, I'm just at a loss for words still to this day because I mean, they did so much for me after knowing me for 3 months. My boss set up a GoFundMe for me. I mean, and it literally saved my life. I would probably still be in a lot of medical debt. I mean, it is never ending. And when you do transplants like this, I mean, I have to still continue to go get scans. And I mean, those things aren't cheap. I mean, as a person with a career, let alone a person who just quit their bartending job and moved to Kansas City and, went through all that. So I hope that answered your question. I know I went on a tangent, but
You can go on
it's
all the tangents you want. That was a great one. And
friends
it
are
is
just
also,
incredible.
yeah, and I think that support system matters. I don't, cannot imagine somebody going through something like that and their whole life changing and they don't have the support to do so. And I love that you had that. I love that it was a good experience as the situation wasn't, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
I'm happy that that was the case for you. And I
Yeah.
do imagine that the medical debt that's taken on with a serious illness is also like the emotional toll that that takes on you as that's happening. You're like sitting here, you're like, okay, I have to fight for my life. I also have to survive. So I need to figure out my career. And oh, also, I have to pay all of these bills. Like, that's not anything one human being should ever have to go through. Like, life is already hard. And then you throw that into the mix. I couldn't personally imagine. And that's why your story is so important. And sharing and talking about these things is important because you only see people going through things and you feel for them and you hurt for them. But to know what actually all goes into that and that time, and my heart just like it was always hurting for you while that was all happening. But it could never have hurt enough. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, 100%. I even remember I got to come visit. I visited you in Nashville an off time. I think I was wearing a wig at that point, but
You had your wigs.
I have lots of wig friends and they're still around. Don't
I was
you
gonna say,
worry.
do you still have them? Like there's somewhere hanging
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, I saved them. So I mean, I think I got rid of like one, but I ended up getting all the colored wigs and it was, a fun time. But no, I mean, to echo what you said, there's so many like amazing relationships that came out of it. So that's why, earlier I say like unfortunately I blocked a lot of like I don't have a ton of memories from that time, but um because I do think it was just subconsciously blocked out, but the
Well,
relationships that
also,
came out of
you have
it
to
is amazing.
remember, like, you were trying to survive.
Right.
Like, this wasn't just you blocking out because of like trauma or things. You were literally, your body was trying to survive a really hard thing. So
Mhm.
blocking out, I don't feel like that's not unnormal. You know what I mean? I feel like that's pretty normal for
Right.
what you were experiencing.
I think I chalk it up because truly, I mean, if you've heard the term pregnancy brain, like chemo brain is also a thing.
Mm, yeah.
And it is, I mean, it is so true. I still feel like it has its lasting effects today. But um, I mean, going back to the financial aspect of it too, I mean, that really was a huge toll because at that time too, I was turning 26. I was getting kicked off my parents' insurance, and there was like a lot at stake there. And so that GoFundMe, when I say it like really, really saved my life, like it truly did. And I'm just so fortunate and grateful for like people who go out of their way to do things to support people like that. And I really always try to pay it back and or pay it forward. And the even on top of that, like a topic I'd love to shed light on is I was approached before my first time doing treatment saying, it might be a good idea for you to consider like saving your eggs. Um, and I didn't consider it at that time. I didn't go through with the process at that time because I really weighed out the risks, and that goes into the money. And although I'm being told by a medical professional that this is something I should consider, it is not considered medically necessary, and it was not covered by insurance. Um, and having cancer, I was fortunate enough to be given the medication for free. That is like just a cancer thing. So I can only imagine women who are like going through, like autoimmune diseases and things like that who don't even get a single discount on any of that process. And it is not cheap, and that I ended up going through it the second time because the severity of the treatment was so much more. And I'm still paying for that for my eggs to be frozen, and I'm so grateful I did that process. It was really really enlightening and just empowering as a woman. And I'm grateful to have those eggs to fall back on. Being I just turned 30 this year, and I don't know what that fate looks like for me based on what I've been through, health wise. So that is something that was like also not only like mentally exhausting to think through at that time when you're not in a relationship, you haven't really experienced your first love, you're not even sure if you want to have kids, but it was just it's just like another thing that I think people don't realize until you're really in it, how much
Hmm.
more there is.
Yeah, I mean that's as just like a human being who's not experiencing it, that's a tough conversation and a tough call to make and to spend money in that direction of like, do I finally make this decision? And as you're going through things, you're like, oh, wait, I also have to think about my future 5 years from now. I'm not even sure what's happening right now. Like, I just, I commend you also, Tori, because I think you are such a beautiful soul. You always have been before all of this and after all of this, but also through all of this. Like you stayed who you were. You did not let the things that were happening to you truly make you like hard and hate the world. Then you could have. You could have chosen that. And I don't think anybody would have blamed you, but you chose not to. And I think that's a testament to who you are as a human being and your family and your friends and the people you surround yourself with. But also, I just hope you know that at the end of the day.
Thank you. I mean, that recognition, it really means a lot because, like I said in the beginning, I feel like my journey went a little under the radar. Not again, like I had so much support and so many people reaching out to me, but for me, I just wanted to get it done and get it over with. So to even be asked to do this and like find myself making some sort of like an impact or my journey made an impact, makes it worth it. So hearing that I mean, it is really like fulfilling. So thank you.
Of course, you are. And I don't say that just to tell you because you're my friend. Like I genuinely mean that. I think you've always been a great person, but I think for anybody to go through something, especially the things that you were going through and still choose hope and joy and love and positivity, and now you have found potentially the love of your life, like I think it's just really cool and I think it's a testament to how strong we are when we don't even know it. And that was you. You had the strength all along. It just the world was testing you on a lot of different fronts and you had to keep choosing it over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's weird like thinking about it all and talk. I haven't sat down and really like talked about it like this. Yeah, I don't know ever, probably.
No, you're probably like, okay, that part of my life is over. We're gonna move forward. But I'm like, hey, Tori, you wanna talk about a really hard time? I'm so sorry, but I love you and you deserve to talk about it. But all of
Well,
that to
yeah.
say,
Oh, go ahead.
no, you're good. Say what you want to say.
I was gonna say, I mean, like with that being said, like so there's a quote that I found pretty early on in my journey, and so a lot of how I tried to pass the time was I love like calligraphy, I love coloring. I don't know, I'm just kind of into that sort of stuff. So I really took that on. Unfortunately, I will say a long-term side effect I've gotten from treatment is I have a really, really bad tremor, and I'm left-handed, and it's when your muscles are like activated, and I haven't been able to really write or like do as much coloring, and I wasn't able to when I was really deep in the medicine then. But I brought this book out. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I wrote like some quotes in here, and like one of my favorites that I just recently shared with a friend of mine. She just recently got married this year, and her fiance essentially like suffered a stroke, and simultaneously has found out that there is like heart conditions involved and things like this. And it's been really tough to like see her go through this. And we've been, chatting, and um she messaged me back. I don't want this to come off like conceited or anything, but she messaged me back and she was like, that message you sent me was like one of the best I've received. Like, thank you so much. And I can't remember exactly what I said. It's just like, like keep your head down, like get through things and lean on your people and that kind of thing. But I'll read the quote, and it's one day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you're going through right now, and it will become a part of someone else's survival guide. And I just love that because it stuck to me back then because I was sitting next to folks who had been going through treatment for months, or I mean a couple even years. And I met really great people out of that experience, and what they were able to share with me like helped me get through that process. So I can only hope that like going forward when people are going through these tough times that like the words and advice that I can like offer can help in just like some little way, because I was given like so much help and love and kindness. And yeah, that's just like one thing that like took away from me, and it's becoming really relevant in the last like several weeks with telling her that. And now I'm being asked to like talk to you, and it just like comes full circle, I guess.
You are making a difference, and sharing your story will help people. It's also going to help people who are part of somebody else's journey, right? And they're like, I heard this and this may be what you're feeling. Maybe this episode will help you. what is the book that you just read that out of? Just so people, you can hold it up.
Well, it's just like a journal.
Oh my gosh, you have like a whole journal. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see it had its moments, but this is more for my first journey. It's kind of cool too. I have a couple examples, but I did pictures of every friend that came and visited me. Well, that was before I cut my hair, but um,
Do you feel like
just
that helped you
whole
like
thing.
really go through your emotions or something more for you after the fact?
I think a little bit of both. I like I said, I kind of like doing that like stuff. And well, what really started it is my friend that I had worked with at the school actually, who had witnessed how exhausted I was, and all of my coworkers were like, okay, like this is like crazy, like it makes sense. She ended up sending me every single treatment. I would get like a little card in the mail, and they had just had like different like inspiring quotes and stuff. And that's what really urged me to start. So they're like on most of these pages, and I have so many of them. And I kind of just coincided the quotes with like a picture from that day, maybe the conversation that me and my friend had while I was getting treatment. I don't know. And that's what really kind of jump started it. But I just thought it was so cute, like getting these little cards. Just, I don't know, that just my vibe, I guess. But
No, I
it
think that's,
got me through it.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think that's something so easy that people are able to do for others that are going through this. Like,
Mhm.
this is why we talk about these things. I would have
Yeah.
never known cards like that, one, existed to this, capacity, and two, that it would be helpful to somebody. So, again, like you are sharing a story that's impactful, that matters, and it's your story, and it's a story of survival and hope, and you've done wonders with it. So I hope you continue to feel that way.
Thank you. I was like looking up to see if the brand name was on there, but it's not.
It's
And this was
okay.
in 2021, so I'm not.
It's
But
probably
no,
on Etsy somewhere.
100%. No, I'll have to
Well,
tell her that we talked about it. And, um, yeah, no, so it's nice like reminiscing on those kinds of things. I even like made really good friends with my nurse, Carlene, and we still talk to this day. She's amazing. And I was very ready to move out of my parents' house after treatment, as you can imagine. And I would I would take every chance I could get to tell Carlene that. And so I was super excited to tell Carlene when I got my lease for my first apartment to live in on my own. And I was like, there's this cute patio, and I can't wait to get it done. And she called me one day out of the blue right before Christmas and was like, are you home? I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. I freak out. I'm like starting to clean everything. She's like, no, 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 you can just come downstairs. And I go downstairs, and her husband had backed up their pickup truck, and he had built me a beautiful bench with a side table. That's on my deck, right now. And it was literally one of the most thoughtful gifts I've ever received in my entire life. And it's just those are the things that I carry with me now. And those are the things, like I said, so many good relationships came out of it. But I like to share that story too. So thanks for letting me.
oh yeah, because nurses and doctors, they do incredible work. And, especially nurses don't get the credit that they deserve. And I love that you got to have that relationship and have one that is still meaningful today. And again, a great reminder of your strength.
Thank you.
I mean, I would look at that bench and see every time, like, okay, I did that. Like, there was a reason that this happened. So amazing. I do want
I
to
love
end
that.
on this, like, good note, if you will. But if there's something you could tell anybody, whether it's somebody going through cancer, somebody who's supporting somebody going through cancer, whatever, what is something that you like wish everybody would know or they would hear?
Um, that is a really tough question. I think just having an understanding that in the end, like, well, that's tough to say because not everyone like makes it through it. But I just feel like being present and being able to like fully listen and just kind of accept for where people are at in the process is the most important. And I think what my friends and family did so well with is not, like it's going to be okay. Because I did have a very curable cancer. I had a light at the end of the tunnel that I was really sure I was going to get to. And I think just recognizing that while, yes, I'll, be there, I'm still here right now. So I think just, giving grace and where people are at in that process is probably the most important. Um,
Yeah, no, that's a really good one. And I think that's a good thing for people to remember because I think it's quick to tell people, be like, you're going to be fine. It's going to be okay. I think we naturally want to do that because, of course, you don't want to be like, oh, you're not going to be okay. But it is also kind of like a band-aid versus just being like, hey, I'm here for you, whatever you need. I
yeah.
think that's something somebody would rather hear more than you're going to be okay.
Yeah. And I hate like I'm never one to, because I get in situations, I'm like, what? I don't know what to say to make this better. I don't. Sometimes you get lucky and you do say the right thing. And sometimes it's just not what they're looking to hear. But I mean, just yeah, being like your genuine self, like you said, I'm here to listen to you, like is just it goes a long way.
Well, Tori, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for opening up about something that is very difficult and a very hard time of your life. But I do think it matters. I think your story is important to hear. So thank you for sharing it.
Thank you, Morgan. I really appreciate you letting me on. This is so exciting.